Welcome, Negronis with Nord, episode 40. We've got a special guest today, Phoebe Bain, who was covering creators and influencers at Morning Brew and is just starting as a senior reporter at Ad Age. We have just finished a couple of drinks and an amazing conversation about everything that happened in influencer marketing last year, everything that we think is going to happen next year. Anyway, we're lucky to catch Phoebe between gigs where she can really dish on what she believes, what she thinks is going to happen in the space, and let's jump into it. Also, special shout out to Danye, who is our Director of Creator Initiatives here at Four, who was just announced as part of Forbes 30 Under 30. An honor that I never got, which is frustrating, but really nice for her. So, go to Danye's Instagram, give her a round of applause. I feel like we haven't done a guest episode for a while, but I have Phoebe Bain here, who we have talked so many times but have never met in person until now, probably because of COVID. But welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
We love having you. So we talked a bunch when you were at Morning Brew covering creators and influencers, and now you are moving to Ad Age, and we caught you in between. So first of all, how are you enjoying your little 2-week vacation with no job?
I know we were talking about this before the podcast started, but I've never done this before. I graduated college and started the Business Insider within the same week. So I've never done this. All of my friends and family were like, you never take off, take time. So
there you go.
Here I am talking about work on a podcast.
We'll catch up in 6 months. Maybe you'll look back on this and be like, thank God I took that time off because I've been so busy.
Yeah, I also haven't been really busy in a while. I started at Morning Brew when we had 30 employees before the company sold to Business Insider.
Yeah.
And now we have 300 employees. So I've seen it in that startup trying to sell type of phase going to a mid-sized company kind of phase. So it was really just 3 years there of building up all of these tasks that I was doing. And I started the Marketing Brew newsletter for Morning Brew, doing it all on my own. And then that was the first year was 12, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, just grinding. And then the next 2 years were just offboarding all of those things. So by the time I left, I didn't feel really busy. Yeah, so I was I could have just stayed at this job and kept going and felt like it was a break, you know what I mean? But yeah, so hopefully by next year or 6 months from now, I'll be a lot busier at
There
that
we go.
age.
Nice thing about 14-hour days is 10-hour days then feel like a vacation once you make that change. So
yeah, I remember my Saturdays, I would just sleep all Saturday because they were the only day that I had off. But it was COVID, right? So what else was I going to do?
Exactly, that or drink. I guess before we get into some questions, we're going to talk today about, I think, what were some of the big trends of this year in influencer marketing and what we kind of feel like is going to happen next year. Before we jump into that, what interested you about this beat? Why? What kind of drew you to talking about this?
Do you want the long answer or the short answer?
We got all day.
Okay, long answer. So I started my career at Social Media Today, which is under Industry Dive. I'd interned for them. They just wanted some native content on their site, essentially. Their website runs on a contributor model. And I essentially ended up in this sort of full-time freelance role after the internship. So I really couched my early journalism career in social media. I was on the social media desk at Business Insider right around the same time. So I felt like I got that part of the industry, and it just seemed where that was going was influencers, if that makes sense. Just watching Social Media Today's news content evolve and watching all the platforms evolve. It just felt like that was a bigger and bigger part of social through the years. So then I started Marketing Brew, and essentially it was just me. Morning Brew had 30 employees that was covering the whole of the marketing and advertising industry. So I covered everything from, programmatic to agencies to CMOs to social media and influencers. And I think because I'd been so familiar with the social media side of things, that was where I felt most comfortable writing about. And so the more stories I got to do on that beat, the more excited I got about it, just due to the sheer comfort of finally it's something I really know and I'm not, just learning as I'm building the wheel that I'm doing. And so once we hired a bunch of other reporters after we sold the company to Business Insider, we all got to kind of specify in our own beats. And my editor came to me and was like, you seem like you really like the social media and influencer stuff. Do you want to cover that? And I was like, yeah, but how does one cover social media and influencer at the same time. Like there are reporters, at other outlets like New York Times and the Wall Street Journal that just cover Facebook, let alone Meta, right? So what we sort of came up with was that I would cover the social media world through the lens of the influencer marketing industry. And I just dove in, and they gave me a month at Morning Brew to just source up and meet people like yourself and influencer marketers and even creators, from all over the place. And they just said, listen, you barely have to write for like all of January. Just go out and meet people. And I just fell in love with it, to be honest. And I felt like I got good at it. In some ways, I'd been doing it for years, but I was only covering influencers in, an official capacity since about a year ago. So yeah, it came naturally.
Perfect. Well, I feel like that segues nicely into your first year of covering this space full time. What was not surprising to you that happened? Like, the space is moving so quickly, it's changing so much. Like from where we were in January to where we are today is quite different. What about that change do you feel like wasn't surprising? And then we'll go into like maybe what did surprise you.
I feel like what wasn't surprising is really sad, honestly. So there were these companies that just like from day one of starting to cover this beat in an official capacity, I was like, I need to know the people at these companies. I need to track what they're doing, like that kind of thing. And they were the Glassdoor for influencer type companies. So the two main ones that I identified from the beginning were Clara and FYPM, right? And some of them were still kind of talking about getting funding or had recently gotten funding. I was just like, well, how are these not like, billion-dollar companies already, if that makes sense? It didn't surprise me that at the beginning, obviously these companies have grown a lot and they did have a really big impact on the space, but I just think that like, it's not surprising that these companies that in my opinion had the biggest impact on the influencer marketing space over the past year aren't being celebrated in the way that they deserve to. And I honestly think it's a female founder thing, as in, this industry, the marketing industry, as are many industries, are really, really sexist, right? And it sucks because, this huge percentage of creators are women and or identify as women. And, these two female founded companies, I just think should be getting every bit of press coverage and every bit of acclaim for how influencer payment has changed over the past year. And I feel like I try and give that to them in my stories, but I just wish that like they were known on a global scale because I think that they changed so many people's lives and aren't getting the recognition they deserve. So that's on the not surprising, unfortunately, front.
As a fuck you pay me investor, I also agree
Yeah.
that they
I actually didn't
specifically
even remember
should
that.
be much larger. I
Yeah.
completely agree. We were so interested in that business and in that space specifically because influencer pricing is so complex, and it's so nuanced and personal in a way that like what you pay for an ad on Morning Brew versus CNN, someone's not going to really take that personally,
No.
right? It's just like it is what it is. It's just business. But when it's you, and when that like that price tag in some way like puts a value on the work that you do, it's like much more personal. There's a lot more emotion in it, and there's so many creators being taken advantage of. We see that a lot, especially on TikTok right now, where we're losing deals because we won't like take advantage of younger creators that don't understand what to charge because we offer, we make offers at fair market value, and a lot of people will make an offer at of 25% of that, and some 22-year-old kid will take it because they don't know what they should charge. So I think those businesses are providing such a great service.
But don't you think a year ago that younger creator was more likely to take that
Yes,
amount than they are now because of the
definitely,
FYPMs of the world?
definitely.
Right? Like they were such a huge part of like just price standardization.
Yeah.
Even among, I also think a year ago there were probably more companies that were offering a slight, like a fraction of what that creator should be getting paid, or on the flip side, far more than that creator should be getting paid than they are now. Like I think these companies created the first, at least in my opinion, price standardization in the industry. And I think that's huge because now that we have a more accurate understanding, over the past year, it's been like this huge jump in accuracy of what this is actually worth. I think that more companies can get involved with it. And, that ends up being more people paying creators what they should be paid, whether that's, far more than they were being paid before, probably in the majority of cases, or far less than they were being paid before. I'm like happy that something finally gave a lens of accuracy to the industry.
Absolutely. I think something, this is a total kind of right turn here, but you talked about how there was like more companies that were willing to pay less. I think something I think about, and this is more of like a next year thing, right? As Meta and TikTok become more, go after this space more. Obviously, like both companies are getting kind of crushed right now. I mean, I think while who knows, like TikTok's results are probably a little harder to kind of get a sense of, but I know they claimed they were going to be 2 billion down on expectations this year on revenue. They've got hiring freezes. Obviously, Meta's got layoffs. Like iOS stuff is killing them. We talked about that in one of your pieces at Morning Brew. The place that it makes sense for both of those brands to come in is in discovery, like in the discovery side of things, and then like payments. But something I talk to influencers about is that like Facebook coming in and commoditizing what you do is probably like a pretty bad thing. It's like for most influencers, they might be competing with 100 other people right now for a deal. But if Meta launches this thing and now they're competing with 1 million people and it's a marketplace where you can just like pick a price and then like that drives prices down dramatically for influencers, which for Meta, generally they probably would like influencer marketing to be cheaper because then like ROAS will be higher, return on ad spend, and they can sell more of those ads. So like generally, I actually think like the platforms getting involved in this space is like a fucking nightmare for influencers.
I completely agree. I completely agree.
Probably good for brands to drive down per influencer pricing. They may not say that, but like ultimately they would like that. But they're probably the only force that can dramatically drive down influencer pricing.
I have to ask you, are you like bullish or bearish on these, creator marketplaces from the platforms in general as to like how they'll do long term?
I'd say generally bearish.
Me too.
I mean, Meta and TikTok, the people that I've talked to in those organizations have literally no idea what they're talking about when it comes to influencer marketing. They're like, it's actually shocking how little they understand it or the extent to which they willfully misunderstand the industry. So they could make it so that you have to work with them. Like you have, if you are going to put a hashtag sponsored post on Instagram, that you have to put the payment through Meta. That's
But
like,
can you just imagine them like trying to enforce that? Like they can barely enforce people having to actually use that hashtag in the first place.
but
You know what I mean? Like that would be such a nightmare.
if we think about the like billions of dollars of revenue they're losing on the advertising side
Maybe
now,
there's some incentive.
right? It is like it is realistically the only way they can, because like the work we do on the like services side is like very people intensive, like for us, to run $1 million of spend takes, 2 or 3 people, and Facebook's never going to do that. They're not going to go and hire 10,000 account people
Yeah,
and build a like
exactly.
enormous agency. They're not going to like go buy, Ogilvy or something. But that's what they would need to do to like support this work at a large scale. So as you think about like scalable ways that they will enter the influencer space, ultimately their end goal is selling paid ads against the content that you create. That's like where they make their money, right? Because from a margin perspective, if I'm paying an influencer $1,000, the most Facebook can take probably is 5% of that.
Mhm.
But if I buy $1,000 of advertising, they take all of it. So ultimately, like it actually is not a big money maker. And when people are like, "Oh, are you worried about Facebook?" Jumping in and doing this, it's just like, look, they make like $10 million a minute or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the actual figure.
I have no idea, but
I think
it
it
doesn't
is.
sound wrong to me at all.
Ultimately, like a month of revenue for them is bigger than the entire influencer marketing space. As far as like margin and what they could keep, it's like it's minuscule. So it actually just like doesn't make an enormous amount of sense for them. But that is how they would get involved. TikTok is like much more, and I'm sure you've seen this in your reporting as well. Like they're much more open to it. They've got a structure in place to even deal with companies like ours. We have like reps that work with us, and at like Meta, we just like don't have anyone.
TikTok, there are people I can talk to for my stories. Meta is like kind of a ghost town,
Yeah.
and they have had like, people high up in their PR and communications department in the past that are really great at sitting down and having conversations like this with me. But in terms of like specialized people for each department. Like TikTok has, their press people are so specialized for each department, right? Like there's somebody that would be able to, like there's probably one person at TikTok who would be able to sit down and have this conversation with us. That's like a press interfacing person. So like that's cool. I feel like Meta is just a bigger animal, so they don't have things like that as much. But in general, I think that TikTok is so much more creator friendly. Just, I'm sure you know that too, like from, people that you've spoken with and creators themselves. But yeah, in terms of
flip
like,
side of that is like they may also ruin the entire industry.
yeah, flip side of that is that.
Like they're driving consumer behavior away from following a person towards following an algorithm, which they control. They're suppressing sponsored posts in the algorithm. Like ultimately, like TikTok performance is like so variable and all over the place. It's like really hard to bet on. Average viewership is 5%, which is an Insta story. So it's like it actually is kind of hard to like pay for it in some ways, because if you're getting 5% average viewership, now you might get 400%, but like it's so all over the place. But I think the scarier thing for influencers is that like training consumers to follow an algorithm and de-emphasizing a follower count means that like you exist to drive advertising revenue for TikTok and views in the platform, and like they're not going to give you anything in return, because like we've seen, I'm sure you've talked to so many creators like this, that they'll build this big following, and they'll be like, oh my God, I got 300,000 TikTok followers in 3 months, and I've been on Instagram for 10 years and I have 10,000. This is such bull. And then like 2 months later, they went from like 300,000 views a video to like 1,000.
Well, it's diluted, right? Just due to the views on each individual piece of content due to the algorithm, yeah? So I feel like it's sort of, I don't know, apples and oranges a little bit, but like they do end up, things can even out, if that makes sense. I think that an interesting sort of like anecdote to that brands are coming up with is they're hiring these internal TikTok creators. Like imagine being hired as a TikTok creator and then all of a sudden TikTok is no longer good for creators.
Like they've been so smart about like making it so much easier to gain a following, and that makes it like sticky. And I feel like it's like playing the lottery versus like building a business, whereas like Instagram is a fucking slog. But if you could like build up 100,000 followers on Instagram, you can like change your life. 100,000 followers on TikTok can like change your life for a month.
Yeah,
but there's no
exactly.
guarantee that like that's actually going to be a sustainable business for you, because like I think that as quickly as you can get like picked up and like risen on some tide, that tide can like flow out just as easily, and you're left with no way to like access those followers.
I think for individual creators, yes. That's why it makes sense for an individual creator or brand or creator to join a brand or an agency, right? Because you have some predictable income, if that makes sense, especially if TikTok is really your only thing. But as any marketing professional knows, if you're gonna do a full-time influencer business, you should not just base it on one platform, right? So
that is true. Hot take time. What is your like percentage probability that TikTok is in the App Store in a year and not banned in the US?
like 90%.
You give it 90?
So first of all, Biden's student debt package just keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed, right? That is so much more of a priority than TikTok getting banned. Like the government works slowly. So it's more the fact that you said like within 2023, will this be off the App Store? That is why I said 90 versus like, will this be off the App Store in 10 years? Yeah, basically the government works too slowly. I don't think this happens in the next year because barely anything happens within the American government within a year. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, yeah, China bans apps, but like China bans a lot of things, right? True. Tech things in particular. But that's such a different country than the US. Like, isn't the entire, the freedom ethos is really more of a right-leaning thing than a left-leaning thing in a lot of ways. For instance, the left historically wants bigger government, the right wants smaller government. So I don't know, in my opinion, I do think that the right might be less upset about it than the left. But honestly, because I think that the businesses that left-leaning people are involved in might be more pertinent to TikTok than people that lean right are involved in. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, it totally could happen, of course. And like, I guess for me to have an educated opinion on this, I would really need to look at other apps that we do not allow in the US.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of context. I think also
Yeah,
it came up.
we might be sounding like idiots.
Well, it came up a few weeks ago when the AG was having a press conference, and there was all this chatter that it was about banning TikTok because they had admitted that the Chinese government was using it to track specific private American citizens' movements that they were like interested in spying on. And so as like a tool of espionage controlled by the Chinese government, I think that like there was this feeling that holy, like on Twitter all day it was like holy, they're gonna ban TikTok today. That's the chatter. So it seems
Which
like
is so ironic
it was a
with
big
that people talking about that on Twitter now.
it ended
as
up
we're waiting for that to
it ended up
collapse.
like not obviously not happening. It was something to do with the phone company out there that but was China related. Following up your point you made 5 minutes ago when I went on this tangent is that creators should be diversifying and making sure they're trying to like move that following across a number of different places.
What do you think about brands diversifying in the sense that do we really want to invest a whole salary and healthcare plan and everything into an employee that only does TikTok and creates TikToks?
Yeah, I mean, I would say absolutely. I think that like what is so interesting about the influencer space right now is they're like normal controls in the way that they can like tell their story in a scaled way. All that is disappearing. And they are losing all of these tools that they had to be able to tell their story. Marketing seems to be turning into not like 10 years ago, it was all about brand storytelling. Brands all had newspapers and magazines and they were doing short films and all that, right? Now, nobody cares. Like, if you're like, who's following a brand? Like following a brand on social is like a kind of like deranged thing to do. People are increasingly are hearing about this stuff from individuals. And so like for brands, they need to, I think they finally have understood that like they can't take their advertising content and then just like post it to TikTok and expect it to, right?
Yeah.
They can't just like take their car
I hope
commercial
you're right about
and
that
like
one.
put it on TikTok.
Yeah.
I think a single person's salary in healthcare to generate millions of views is like a pretty good deal for most brands, given what they spend on advertising. As we go into 2023, what should brands be concerned about or thinking about, and what do you think they should be like really excited about in terms of influencer marketing?
I think they should be really excited about the fact that we're going into kind of our first Q1 in a while with an actual idea of how we price these things, right? And if I'm in marketing at any company right now, especially within like the social or influencer side of marketing, I would be really excited about the fact that I have a better chance of convincing my CMO that what I do matters than ever, because we've just like, really narrowed in on what this is worth, far more than we had a year ago. I would be excited about that.
What should they be concerned about?
Oh, what should they be concerned about? So much. I mean, the volatility of social platforms, obviously, they should be diversifying. What do you think they should be concerned about?
The concern, realistically, what it's going to be, and I think we've been talking about this for 6 months, is there is pressure on stock prices, there is pressure on earnings, there's pressure on sales.
That's what I was going to say, actually. Yeah.
The media, y'all included, are going to will this recession into happening. Like they will not rest until they tell people that
they're so right. And I work in the media, so I can guarantee that you're right.
They're like, they are going to will this recession into happening. And brands have to be more careful with spend. And I think that like influencer, which like doesn't have the like ROAS, that return on ad spend, that other like performance lower funnel marketing has, like there's going to be pressure on that. So it's like interesting because like I am feeling from brands what you're talking about with excitement. Like we are getting so much more CMO engagement than we ever have. I talked to CMO of a $40 billion company the other day that was moving their entire TV budget to influencer.
Can you please tell me that that was the CMO of Radio Shack, who I just found out is 20 years old when I saw them on the Forbes list today?
Oh my God, they put them on the Forbes. That's funny. That excitement exists, but like with it, we are exiting this world where brands are spending $250K or $500,000 a year and entering when they're spending 5, 10, 15 million a year. And so there's so much more scrutiny. There's so much more like expectation about what those dollars are going to get you. And so it's like this interesting kind of dichotomy where like there is unprecedented excitement and unprecedented scrutiny. Add that into like economic headwinds and pressure on ad spend in general. And I think most marketing professionals, less like courageous CMOs or marketing directors, are going to just go for higher ROAS, tried and true performance marketing and say like, oh, this is something we do when things are going really well and things aren't going really well right now. So we're not going to do that. And I think that's like the concern for influencers as well going into next year, is that like in the same way that there is like this crackdown right now on employees, right? There's this feeling that like employees have gotten entitled and they've gotten like so used to these perks, and like all the tech companies are kind of pulling all of that stuff out. I'm not saying this about my employees, if y'all are watching. I don't think any of you are entitled. I think we're gonna see the same with influencers. I think some influencers have been dialing it in,
I hope so,
have
yeah.
been like not putting a lot of effort into this content. We've gotten used to, spending 10 minutes on a post and making 10 grand on it, and like not caring about the performance. Not all of them, but like I think those days will be gone. In the same way that like the jokes about the like, product manager TikToks at like Meta, like those days are probably gone.
Yeah.
Like so are the days of like a $10,000 check and there's no real expectation that it worked.
So I wrote a story at some point over the past year about a certain platform, and I had to interview creators for it and about, kind of what they think of influencer marketing on this platform. And I so rarely, not rarely, but I'd say like, 9 out of 10 conversations that I have for my job as a journalist covering this space are with people like you, people working at influencer marketing agencies or in-house for a brand as influencer marketers. And like one of those 10 conversations is with an influencer. So like it's rare that I get their perspective just because I'm writing for a marketing audience, right? But I had to interview all these influencers for the story. And I remember asking one of them, okay, how many followers do you have on this platform? And this influencer was repped by an agency, and the agency, was really one of my main sources for the story. But they were like, oh, you should talk to some of the creators that we're actually repping too. And, my editor wanted that. So I talked to the agency. They're super, super knowledgeable about all of this. All of their talent management reps are, wonderful. I was like, how many followers do you have on the platform? Just for some context for the story, and she didn't even know how to find how many followers she had on the platform. So the idea that perhaps as pricing gets more standardized and as the economy shifts, that people would have to stop phoning it in that way actually really excites me for the most selfish of reasons, because this was a person that's making some sort of an income off of this, right? I'm not going to say or not say whether they were doing it full time, but they're making some sort of money off of this. And like the fact that you don't know how many followers you have on a platform that you have an agency that you're paying to represent you for, like I would love it if that was no longer the case. I don't know. I don't want to make it sound like influencers need to work harder, because influencers work very, very, very hard, and influencing and being an influencer or creator is feminized labor. And I think that the idea that they don't work hard comes from a really anti-feminist and anti-fem and woman stance. But I'd like for them to know how many followers they have.
I think it's more of just like a natural market force as well of like more competition. Like I started this business 10 years ago. We were like the first platform of its kind. And there were probably 200 people in the world doing this and making any money whatsoever in 2012.
And you could probably name all of them, as could I.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now there are, 10 million people doing this, maybe more. There's probably, I don't know, at least 1 million people making like decent money doing this as their career. And so like there's more competition. I mean, we didn't have to compete with anyone 10 years ago. Nobody else did it, And now every day someone texts me, oh, have you heard of this business? I'm like, no, I haven't heard of them. Like but yeah, that means you have to try, like, you have to try harder. And I think that, like, ultimately that's going to be good for brands and for influencers, that like there is more pressure, like, and again, some of it is from the economics and from what's happening in the markets, but some of it is just that, like, this is becoming a bigger part of what brands are doing. Our vision is in the next 5 to 10 years, this is the dominant form of advertising in the world. This is where brands are spending the most money, the most time, the most resources. We believe that that is going to happen, and that's going to come with like a lot more scrutiny.
Yeah, it's honestly, I mean, it's a feminized labor issue, and I think that people, if this was a male dominated industry, everybody would be saying this is going to be the dominant form of advertising in the next 5 or 10 years. But there's something about the number of women that, you know, make up the space that is making people, I think, blinded to a really obvious reality, right? That this is an important part of the marketing industry, and that I really think it's here to stay. I talk to people like you, I talk to people like these women at the agency called The Motherhood. They started just repping like mommy bloggers, you know, I think more than 10 years ago. And they're still here, they're still kicking. So like the people that have been in this industry for a decade or more know this isn't going anywhere. And I think that the rest of the marketing industry, as well as the world at large, would know that if it was a male dominated industry.
And look, that's also why CMOs generally, like, who trend towards being white men, have not been interested in this space. I mean, you know, we've put probably $100 million into influencers' pockets, which means we've made, you know, quite a bit more than that. I've had like probably 5 CMO conversations in 10 years.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
So I
They
have
just
had
like don't, they just like don't care. They don't get it. I think it is seen as like, and certainly this was true of investors, that it was seen as like a woman's thing, and that they were just like, I don't get it. I'm not, it's a fad. It's like not going to really be a thing. And I think on the CMO side, it was like, I can't win awards for this. And there just really hasn't been much interest in it, like, and which is kind of wild.
the professionalization of this space, I think in either 2021 or 2020's end of year recap that I wrote for Marketing Brew. I think I said that I've basically written about this in a recap of industry trends somewhere, that the professionalization of influencers and influencer marketing was going to be a trend. And I think that there's a lot of different organizations that we can thank for that. One of them is the American Influencer Council. You know, the fact that we have like a real trade organization for this industry is important, right? So yes, absolutely, everything that you're saying is so correct. As CMOs start to trend younger, I think there will be more respect for this regardless of gender, especially as more CMOs are creators themselves. Like you look at Katie Welch from Rare Beauty, who is a creator, right? And that has helped her role as CMO, in my opinion, so much, right? Because people can really engage with her and engage with the brand via her on social media. Yeah, I'm hoping.
We launched that brand with her.
Oh my God, really? What?
Yeah.
I genuinely didn't know this. I promise. She's just great and has you know, been a
she's
Twitter or
fantastic.
whatever social media follower of mine. So yeah.
She's great. Part of the fallout from the public markets over the last 9 months is we're going to see a lot of CMOs lose their jobs in the next 6 months. And I think that, like, for the first time in a while, we're going to start to see, what do they call me? A geriatric millennial? Geriatric millennials such as myself start to step into more of those leadership roles as like the like mid 50s to like 70s. Like people probably lose their job because like somebody has to get fired. Like ultimately, if your stock is down like 70% in a year, like people have to get fired. There's really like nothing you can.
You really think that that's going to be, are we calling that as a trend for 2023?
Absolutely.
CMOs losing their
I think we're going to
jobs?
see a lot of CMOs lose their jobs. I mean, this is again like Meta gained $12 billion in market cap the day they did those layoffs. Like the market wants to know that you are serious about making changes when things aren't going well. So your fault or not, like part of the reason C-suite people make so much money is that like when shit goes wrong, somebody has to get fired, and it's going to be the CMO, the CEO. Those are probably like the two most likely people to get fired, because like you just have to say to the market, like, we are changing direction. We see that this is a problem. And like, if you're a public company, and even, you know, if you're private, I think that like people will be looking to like make a change and like understanding like the world is changing. You know, we started the business to really support influencers and to kind of give people this opportunity to do something creative and interesting with their lives and make money on it. And I think you probably have that perspective as well of like what this is like for influencers and what it's like for brands. So like, what do you think those two groups misunderstand about each other? Like what do brands not get about influencers, or what do they often get wrong? And what do the influencers kind of generally not understand about brands?
I think this is changing, is what I'll say. What I'm about to say is currently changing, but historically, brands have not understood that influencers are human beings. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you guys all have some knowledge of the marketing industry, but I think that influencer marketing is the first marketing channel that where the channel is a person, where the channel isn't just something that you can plug and play, if that makes sense. So I did the story about influencers who are couples, right, and who operate their business as a couple, about what happens to their brand deals when they break up. So it was like, what happens when an influencer couple breaks up? What's up with the brand deals? Right. And a lot of the people that I talked to for that story were essentially like, yeah, we're an influencer marketing agency that is used to this type of thing, or we're an influencer talent agency that might specialize in couples, or like, reality dating show stars, if you will, that specializes in this. And so we're used to influencers breaking up and having to notify the brands about joint deals that they've done and that kind of thing. And they were basically like, brands don't understand, or are beginning to understand now, but it's very new, that influencers are people and they do things like die and get sick, and pet influencers die, right? And break up and have a death in the family, right. And all these, like, have a baby and have to go on maternity leave. Like, they are living specimens that do all the things that living specimens do, such as dying, give birth, and grieve, right? And I think that if brands could understand that more, rather than saying, my TV ad can't run, not because this network doesn't exist anymore, but because this person just had a baby, right? I think everybody would be better off in the equation. And by better off, I like don't even mean financially better off. I mean that brands would like just take their like heart rate down a lot and their stress level down a lot by saying like, this is what we get into by dealing with influencers, but it's worth it monetarily. Like, obviously it's worth it monetarily to people like us who know about the industry and have seen the results. So that's what I think brands don't understand about influencers. What influencers don't understand about brands, honestly, like I said, I would say that 9 out of 10 of my conversations are more brand or agency or talent manager focused than they are influencer focused. But on the rare occasion that I get to speak with influencers, I think influencers could feel a little bit more empowered to run their businesses if they really understood that what they're doing is a part of that brand's bottom line, and you're a player in this business, right? You're not just collecting a paycheck, like you are an important facet of this organization.
Yeah. And it actually ties in so nicely with the like human side as well, because brands do need to understand that like it's like an emotionally taxing thing to even to like the day you're posting, right? If you're like feeling down or like something's happened in your life and you have to like go on stories and talk about this product that you like apparently love, and then you've got to like be on there to like respond to DMs and comments, like that stuff is like not easy emotionally.
No,
Like
it's
you have
really
to be in
not.
you have to be in that space. And again, the flip side is that like I think sometimes influencers don't get that like if the post is supposed to go live Tuesday because the product is launching, like Thursday actually doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? That like you are part of this like bigger machine that doesn't exist on like your whims and desires necessarily. And that like while we ask brands to like have some grace and understanding with influencers, I think it's like what we're really talking about is also partnership, about like being honest and understanding like that as an influencer takes that deal, you have a responsibility and you are part of this like bigger machine. And on the brand side, that like this is, yes, a form of media,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
also a like breathing form of media that is a person.
And you know what I feel like could be an interesting solution for that is just like people going out to dinner. You know what I mean? Like, I think that so much of the influencer marketing industry began to mature during COVID and during lockdown. I just feel like these people are so rarely meeting each other in person unless it's like a huge ambassadorship type deal. And I actually think that these people just like sitting down over food or wine or whatever and talking would help a lot.
I agree. Let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
just like we'll get them all together.
We'll do a conference.
Absolutely. That
You
sounds
heard it here
great.
first.
Well, cheers to that.
Cheers to that,
And
absolutely.
thank you for coming on today and good luck in the rest of your role. I think, we should check in 6 months and see how much of the stuff we were right about and see where we're at in the industry.
I'm the worst at making predictions. I'm going to be wrong at every single one, so I can't wait to come back and be so embarrassed. That sounds great. But thank you so much for having me. I so
Well, I
appreciate
mean,
it.
look, Jim Cramer's been wrong about basically every prediction in his life, and he still has a job. So
Totally. Yeah.
I think we'll be fine. All right.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.